Speaking of DJ Reader, he's also being pursued by the Cleveland Browns, which our guy John Kosko, he's a fan of. I guess since we're on the topic, John, I know that you've been. Whoa! Is this a Lions jersey?
Oh,
hey!
Barry Sanders.
Okay,
Barry
let's
Sanders,
go.
yeah.
Lions fan.
Hey, man, appreciate that, man. Hey, I know I brought you on to talk a little bit about Carlton Davis and maybe even a little bit of Amik Robertson too, but Amik Robertson, I should say. But I saw you put out a tweet this week too for DJ Reader going to your team, the Browns.
Yeah.
What is your takeaway from DJ Reader? Because we have some fans here in Detroit that are sleeping on him because there aren't sack numbers. But we're trying to explain interior defensive linemen sometimes you just plug holes.
Yeah, sack numbers lie, I would say. Just they will generally lie when it comes to especially defensive interior players, but even edge rushers, they'll lie in terms of how the quality of the play they're having. Obviously, sacks are a big part of the game, and they make their big splash plays that, essentially end drives, but they don't tell the whole story because let's say, the difference of I take the example of Myles Garrett and TJ Watt because they're always talked about as two of the best, obviously, but who's better and who, Myles Garrett for us was better. Myles Garrett had 16 sacks this year, but TJ Watt had 20. If you just go off of that number, yeah, you'd say that TJ Watt was a better player this year, but that they both had near 1,000 snaps this year, and you're going to go off of a 4-snap difference of who the better player was when you got to look at the pressure rate. You've got to look at how they're being utilized, how often they're being double teamed, what the offense is kind of scheming away from them. So there's a lot more that goes into play with that. And yeah, DJ Reader has been a phenomenal player for the Bengals when he's healthy and on the field. And just because he doesn't get sacks doesn't mean he's not getting pressure. He's not making an impact in the run game. So he's an all-around quality player that would, for any team really, I think that from a value standpoint, be one of the better defensive tackle signings of this free agency period.
Our guy Chris in the CD booth, he's casually watched football the past 2 years since working with us. He's kind of gone hardcore. He made a statement that the Detroit Lions could propel into a top 10 defense with the acquisition of DJ Reader. I just got to get your take on it because you know football better than anybody here right now, or you study it more than us for sure.
Well, I think look at the Lions last year. They were an improved defense from the year before, and it's that kind of started in the middle of the 2022 season where they had some coaching changes. They made some personnel changes there as well. But basically, they revamped their entire secondary last year. Obviously, they're making some more moves to improve that again this year because you can't rest your laurels on how good you were the year before, especially on defense, because there's always going to be changes. Teams have a full offseason to see who are the weak points on your team, and you really can't. There's a lot of uncertainty that comes with the secondary. So they did a really good job last offseason, I thought, of improving the team, and I think they're doing the same. Carlton Davis, he's a guy that he plays well. I think he shadows a lot of number one wide receivers. Does he shut them down? No, I don't think that's probably a role he should be doing. I think don't force him into a role that maybe he's not a lead at or anything like that. But I think he's a quality player. From a grading perspective, he's not he grades elite or anything like that. But he's not a liability out there. He has some weaknesses and stuff like that. But I think if you were to add, a DJ Reader, would that make you a top 5 defense right off the bat? Probably, I don't know, maybe not. But they're already a good defense, and you'd make a really good defense better. And maybe that falls them into the top 5 this year. But I think it's a whole package thing of the moves that the Lions are making that make them better as from year over year.
And a lot of Lions fans are worried about the Brad Holmes going to injury-prone players or injury players that in these past 3 free agent signings that he's made this year or potentially going to make this year with DJ Reader. But you look at Davenport that he brought in and Carlton Davis, both have suffered injuries in the past and have dealt with injuries. Is that something that concerns you with guys that they're bringing in that maybe they're not going to be seeing the field, or is that just anybody can get injured? You can't think of it too much.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. There's been a lot of studies done on it and research done on it where when somebody gets hurt, maybe they have a track record of getting hurt, but really I think it's you bring them into a situation where you think you can maybe provide better medical care, better training staff type of thing that can help maybe with soft tissue injuries. And you can see it on certain teams like the Chargers, for example. They traditionally get more injured than other teams. And that's probably has to do with directly on what's going on in their team, what the facilities they have there, whereas other teams will have a better track record of not being hurt. So I think, I don't think it has anything really to do with the individual player. Sometimes they are, injury prone, but it's really kind of more of a fluke thing. And guys can, you saw it for a couple of years. Christian McCaffrey was injury prone for the last 2 years he was with Carolina. All of a sudden he's no longer injury prone when he goes to the 49ers. Like, I think it's one of those things where, maybe the different places you go to, you're able to better take care of your body. The training staff there is able to help, mitigate injuries that you might have.
Christian McCaffrey hopes he's not carrying the freaking team on his back like he was in Carolina. I have a real quick question too when it comes to like Carlton Davis, because he's kind of brought in to be like our cornerback one. How much of an upgrade is he versus a guy like Cam Sutton in your eyes?
It's Cam Sutton's a good player, and they're both good players. So you're hoping that Cam Sutton, I think, had a down year this past year, and I think you're bringing him in to be, maybe a guy that can help alleviate some of that type of pressure off, right? He's a guy that can play in press man. He can travel from both, one side to the other. Like, we've seen that with him channeling ones, and maybe you don't want him to do that, but he's a guy that can play a high percentage of man snaps, and he can, lock down on good wide receivers. So, I think when it comes to the secondary, I'm not looking at it as we got to replace this guy or whatever. I think I look at it as we want quality players in that secondary and bodies in that secondary, because it's a position that can get, guys can get hurt, and you need to be able to stop these opposing offenses that have these prolific wide receivers. And I think the more bodies you throw at it, you see it year after year. You talk about when teams win the Super Bowl or make it to the Super Bowl, or even have a potential contention for that, they're talking about their secondary and how good that secondary was that year. Look at the Chiefs. They're highlighted by, obviously, Chris Jones is a stud on the defensive interior, but Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed, two of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, really kind of transformed their defense in terms of what they were able to do. And if you can find guys like that and then not have the weak links behind them, I think that's really what it comes down to for the secondary, is really patching up any sort of weak links that you might have.
And another guy that the Detroit Lions added was Amik Robertson. This is a guy from the Raiders that has done a lot of different things. The Lions have shown that they're very happy with versatile players in that defensive backfield, like Cam Sutton. They went out and got a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They drafted a Brian Branch. Now they add Amik Robertson. Where do you see him at his best in that defensive backfield? What position would he be at where he's thriving the most?
He's going to be mostly a slot guy, but he can move inside and outside. I wouldn't say that he's he's kind of starting to come into his own in the last 2 years in the NFL. His first 2 years in the NFL, he struggled, I'd say. He didn't play much, obviously, but when he was on the field, he didn't perform. He's a guy that's also, you can rely on him on the special teams. He was one of the higher graded special teams players last year, so he's probably going to have a good role in that for the Lions. And then, I think, he's a guy that you can bring into the slot. He's a guy that if you have him there, you can make Brian Branch more movable in your secondary and have the matchups that you want with Brian Branch, rather than, this maybe only having him in the slot. He's a guy that can be moved around a bit. So I think he brings that versatility that allows more versatility with Brian Branch, who was awesome this year for you guys. I thought he was, he is one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL, especially already, as a rookie, and he's only going to get better. So I think for him, he allows just more versatility in that secondary, and it brings that veteran presence of, like, he can play the slot, he can play the out wide, and you can have the matchups that you want there.
Speaking of veteran presence, for some reason, a lot of people here in Detroit seem to credit Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with the turnaround of the team rather than Dan Campbell, who's been here since the start. And it's a whole side quest there. But what do you make of, like, the emergence of Afonso Melifonwu, who kind of pushed CJ into that rotational role to where now he's no longer with Detroit and went to pursue a starting role and more money in Philadelphia? Like, how has that emergence been to you? And it's for the Lions fans to kind of settle their nerves. Afonso Melifonwu, would you put him on that CJ level, or maybe even somewhat above for what we got going on here?
He's a guy that he's emerging, right? Like he had a breakout year in 2023. You know, talking about obviously he didn't play as many snaps in his first 2 years. This year he had 356 in coverage, was a 75.8 in that role. You know, 535 snaps for the season with an 82 grade, which is phenomenal. I mean, he's a guy that you can, you know, he didn't pass rush much, but he in his pass rushes he was great. He was getting after the quarterback with a lot of pressures just on 20 pass rush snaps. So he's a guy that you know, he's another movable chess piece that you can have for your secondary. And I think his emergence allows you to stay young and be cheaper in the secondary positions, because, you know, the more value you can get out of your players, the better. He's a guy that, you know, I think when you look at his positions, you know, he played in the slot, he played out wide, he was, you know, he could play in free, he was in the box. So you moved him all over the place, and he was successful everywhere he was able to play. And I think with you know, like just adding more versatile pieces like you have is just going to make him, you know, he allows him to be put into the better positions that he can play, and just make, you know, you'll never want to like be pigeonholed into this is where we're going to be lined up and this is how we're going to line up every play. You want to be able to move these pieces around and always confuse what the quarterback is looking at, and it just allows him to do that because with his emergence and the additions that you've made in speech, you know, like Amik Robertson.
And a lot of Detroit Lions fans throw quite a hefty amount of shade on Aaron Glenn for what his defense looks like and what mainly his passing defense, because the run defense has been so great. Now that we see him get some of the guys that fit his system, like a Carlton Davis, like an Amik Robertson, and adding an Ifeatu Melifonwu, who you was sending as a blitzing demon in the second half when he started getting in there. Do you believe that his scheme is going to improve now that he's got his pieces in there, or is it something that he needs to adjust to the NFL?
I think he's when defensive coordinators are always going to be adjusting, right? So like that you bring in pieces that you see fit in terms of, hey, this is, you know, I do, you know, they're going to like a certain type of system that they run, right? Like, you know, you're not going to always have to be able to adapt completely to, you know, the Bill Belichick way of like having a completely different scheme week in, week out when the Patriots are at their prime. You're going to have a system of how you want it. Like, you know, you look at Pete Carroll, who's like the cover 3 type of guy, and you're not going to really change off of that. I think Aaron Glenn is going to, you know, have his system in place where he wants to be able to have these movable pieces. And I think being able to have these guys blitz and being able to have coverage guys behind that, and so you can be aggressive. You know, I think he likes to be aggressive, and I think you're going to see more of that, and you're going to have guys on the back end that can back up your blitzes, because the blitz isn't always going to get there, and you want to be able to cover on the back end when you do have this aggressiveness. And so I think it's going to be you're going to see a little bit of you know, evolution of his scheme with the guys that he wants, and we'll see really kind of what comes of it, because I think year in, year out, you know, you see it quite often. Like defensive coordinators, they could be a heavy blitz team one year, and then the next year they're middle of the pack in terms of blitz rate. So really kind of, he's going to feel out his team in terms of what they can do well, and then adjust from there, I would imagine.
Real quick, we got a guy, Nick, in the sound booth. He's been he's kind of feeding for our guy, or not our guy yet, but Eric Armstead he's a big fan of. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, just talk about helping out the guys on the back end. It's up front, first of all, but talk about a guy no bigger in length of Eric Armstead. Could you see that actually being a fit for this Detroit Lions defense on the defensive line?
You know, I'm always just a fan of getting good players, and he's a good player. You know, he's how many years he's been in the league? 9-10 years now as a vet. Really long, big player. Can, you know, be moved around on that defensive line, all sort of places in the interior, and get after the passer. So I absolutely see him as a fit for the Lions because of what he likes to do. You know, you can single up Aiden Hutchinson on one side, and you get your other 3 rushers on the other side, and then you can blitz it and drop guys and move them all over, stunt them, whatever you may do. And he's a guy that can definitely assist in that and alleviate some pressure off of Hutchinson, because you're getting a guy that can be, you know, a high pressure rate type of guy. It's a disruptive force on the interior, And I think that absolutely could help you guys.
And then I want to ask too, just because they kind of started to pose a threat there in the back half of the season, the Packers. What have you made of their acquisitions of Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, and do you think Detroit Lions fans should be a little bit nervous? I'd ask the Bears too, but they got a lot more tailoring to do through the draft and whatnot. I guess more specifically the Packers. Should we be a little bit nervous?
I mean, the biggest thing about the Packers is does Jordan Love continue his leap that he made mid season? He really made a leap into really quality play. I thought in the first half of the season he struggled a bit. His accuracy was like all over the place, and then in this, once he kind of settled down into that starting role, he really showed really good accuracy, ball placement, big time throws, really protected the ball pretty well. Obviously leading, the Packers into the playoffs pretty far. So I think with him, that's what it comes down to, is if he can take that next step, that's where the Packers become scary, because the addition of Josh Jacobs doesn't do anything for me. They got rid of a better running back for Josh Jacobs, I think. I thought Aaron Jones is a really good running back still. Yeah, he gets hurt and stuff like that, but really when it comes down to the running back position, if you can't create yards after contact, or even beyond what the offensive line can give you, then you're kind of replaceable. Josh Jacobs is kind of that guy last year, and really, if you have an elite level offensive line, any running back can run well behind it. And I thought Aaron Jones is a better pass catcher out of the backfield than Josh Jacobs is as well. So, maybe they wanted to get younger at the position, but they paid a lot of money for that. And I think you could, you could have found other pieces there to help you with that. Xavier McKinney is a good safety. That's a good acquisition for them, and he's just going to be a good secondary piece for them. But really, I think when it comes down to the Packers, if Jordan Love is the next Aaron Rodgers, then you're going to have problems for the next decade.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's for sure. Going back to the Lions and talking about that final piece of their defensive backfield that we didn't really mention yet is Kirby Joseph, and he took a little bit of a step back in year two, maybe not play-wise, because he still was out there making plays. He's making tackles. He saved a lot of touchdown runs or receptions where players were breaking out, and he was the last line of defense and made the tackle. But he didn't have those game-breaking plays, a lot of the interceptions and big hits that we saw in year one. Do you see him taking a step forward in the next year, especially with some more veteran presence around him in that secondary?
It's kind of a make-or-break year for him, I'd say. Obviously, his grade as a rookie was a 64, and he dropped down to a 56.4, right? So his level of play, like you just talked about, did take a hit. He was better as a run defender, but his coverage aspect did suffer in the second year. So yeah, you bringing in more pieces, if you can get more pressure on the quarterback. Safety is a really difficult position to play in the NFL, because you're the last line of defense, and if you make a mistake, everybody on the field knows it. Whereas if you generally make a mistake as a pass rusher, you don't get home to the quarterback, you're really not looking at that aspect of it, and you're just looking at the guy that gave up this 50-yard play or whatever. So for him, I think that it is a big year to improve. He's your main free safety guy. He can be moved around in the box and in the slot a bit, but I think he needs to step up in year three. But I would not, as a Lions fan or anything, I would be looking to hope, maybe find a potential replacement for him if he can't, replicate, show some type of progression or whatever. Because, I think, the NFL, it's not for long, and it's not like you have a big, commitment to the guy. He was a third round pick into the third round. So I think it's a big year for him to really kind of step it up and show that he really belongs on a championship caliber team.
And then, John, I'm so sorry for keeping you longer than planned. I'm gonna let you get going. I just want to ask this one last question to, articulate for Lions fans. Where's the drop off from L'Jarius Sneed, who they're rumored to get, versus Carlton Davis? How big of a drop off is that?
So I think L'Jarius Sneed is a more physical cornerback that is better at shutting down number one wide receivers. I would say that the drop off it's not significant, but I think there is a good drop off there. And I think he is a player that, you know, if the Lions were able to get, like, you're then stacking the secondary with really high quality players, and you'd be really a kind of force to be reckoned with, you know, in the NFC, to be able to stop the likes of the 49ers when, you know, with all their weapons and stuff like that. So he's definitely I'd say a higher quality player. You know, I had him in the top 20 of my cornerback rankings this year. I had Carlton Davis just in the 30s. So, you know, I think there is a leap that you make to get to L'Jarius Sneed, and I think he does a better job of shutting down number ones.
Man, I appreciate you so much. Again, sorry for keeping you long.
Not a problem. Happy to be talking with you guys.
Thanks,
Hell yeah,
Sean.
man. I love talking ball. I guess let me do this one then. How many owls would you need to see in a day before you got a little suspicious?
How many owls would I need to see in a day before I got?
Yeah.
I think I'd need to see one, right?
My thought process on it is I see one, it's cool. I see two, it's weird. I see three or more, then I start like calling my family and making sure they're okay.
All right, yeah. You see, I get that. You see one, it's like, oh, that's really cool. Nah, you see more than that, you're just kind of like, oh, that gets weird.
Something's going on.
I don't know where that question comes from, but yeah.
We're just like
I
just
was
like
draft
throwing random
season,
ones in
we're
there.
asking
Yeah.
weird draft questions.
There you go. See, I just spent a week in Bon Air, island in the Caribbean, so I was doing scuba diving and stuff like that, seeing all sorts of aquatic life that you'd never see anyways. So like,
Oh, that's awesome.
none of it's gonna be weird to me right now.
John, appreciate you so
Thank
much
you,
for
man.
joining us, man. Before we let you go, why don't you let the people know if you got any articles coming out, where they can find more of your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So PFF.com, I write during the season. I write the cornerback rankings every single week, and I'll write more stuff on the draft prospects. But coming out on Friday, I'll be having a piece on who are the winners and losers, not the winners and losers, but most improved position groups across the NFL were after the first couple days of free agency. So
Nice.
PFF.com, also Twitter account at John Kosko 3.
Did the Lions make that article by chance?
I haven't started writing it actually.
Okay, my bad.
because-
My bad.
I mean, technically, free agency just started a couple hours ago,
That's
right?
fair. That is very true.
John, appreciate you
So,
joining
I-
us, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course.
Thank you, man.
Dude, it's
Shout out to John.
awesome.
Definitely kept it longer than I said we'd have him on. So shout out to John.
Shout out
for
to
sure.
John for sure, and shout out to the PFF guys, man. They know their shit, dude.
Yes.
Those guys, that's what they do. They
Shout out
eat,
the nerds.
sleep, live, breathe football.
That's the cool thing though, is like 'cause certain guests you have to like just tailor your questions to like what they know, like in
Yeah.
their wheelhouse. This guy, like DJ Reader, Eric Armstead, we just almost throw
And
like
he's got all of the information.
He knew their grades.
When I brought up Kirby Joseph, he was like, yeah, he's a 64 year one. He dropped down to a 58 year down.
Yeah, dude.
It's those guys, man. That's what they live for, and you can tell because they all do fantastic work.
Absolutely.